Saeed was sitting in the small lawn of his old house. The darkness of the night was hidden away, only the moonlight casting shadows on the mansion's walls. The mansion was old, and Saeed had inherited it from his grandfather. He lived alone, with no neighbors around. That night, as Saeed sat with a cup of tea, there was a knock on his door. Startled, he looked up, but there was no one outside. The old chest. The next morning, while cleaning his house, Saeed came across an old chest. It was covered in thick dust, but when he opened it, he found an old photograph inside. The photo showed a man and a woman, appearing to be a married couple. Saeed thought that perhaps this photo belonged to his ancestors. However, as soon as he touched the photo, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The mystery of the photo. That night, Saeed lay on his bed, staring at the photo once more. In the picture, the woman's eyes seemed to hold a strange pain. Saeed tried to learn more about the photo, but no old memories came to his mind. Throughout the night, the photo brought disturbing dreams to his mind, where a woman seemed to call him to her. The terrifying knock. The following night, there was another knock on the door. Saeed opened it, but this time he was struck with fear. Standing outside was the same woman from the photograph. Her face was as white as ice, and her eyes were filled with terror. Saeed quickly shut the door and huddled on his bed. But that night, sleep eluded him as the sound of the knock echoed in his mind. Who was she? Saeed asked his neighbor about the photo and the woman. After a moment of silence, his neighbor revealed that the photo belonged to his grandparents. His grandmother had lived her life in that very mansion, and her spirit was said to haunt the place since her death. It was believed that her ghost still roamed the house. Leaving the house, Saeed's friend advised him to leave the house. However, Saeed dismissed the idea, thinking it was just a figment of his imagination. But that night, as Saeed sipped his tea, he left the door open, and a cold breeze swept through the mansion. He noticed that the photo was no longer on the bed. It had fallen. Reality or fear? The next morning, Saeed searched every corner of his house for the photo, but it was nowhere to be found. He looked through the old parts of the house but found nothing. All that remained in his mind was the woman's face and her terrifying eyes. He wondered if his mind was playing tricks on him. The final knock. That night, there was another knock. This time, Saeed chose not to open the door. He decided to hide under his bed. The knocking continued relentlessly until Saeed held his breath. Suddenly, everything went silent. Gathering his courage, he opened the door, but no one was there. As he opened the door, an old, terrifying voice echoed in his ears. "You may have forgotten me, but I will not forget you." The tale of death. From that night on, Saeed heard the same voice every night. His face grew pale with fear. One day, his friend visited him only to find Saeed unconscious on his bed. Although Saeed's breathing was faint, his eyes were filled with a strange fear. He told his friend, "She will take me. She won't leave me." The terrifying end. On his final night, Saeed called his friend and asked him to burn the photograph. When his friend came to retrieve the photo, he found it back on the bed, even though it had been hidden beneath. He attempted to burn it, but the photo wouldn't catch fire. Suddenly, horrifying screams erupted from the photograph. After that day, no one ever saw Saeed again. It is said that the woman's ghost still roams the house, and anyone who enters never returns. Emily and her friends decided to explore the abandoned house on the outskirts of town. The locals whispered about the house being cursed, but curiosity got the better of them. The wooden door creaked as they pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit hallway covered in dust. As they stepped inside, an eerie silence enveloped them. Emily felt a chill down her spine, but she shrugged it off as nerves. Little did they know, they had just stepped into a nightmare. The first night, the group decided to spend the night in the house, thinking it would be a fun adventure. As the night deepened, strange noises echoed through the walls. Emily heard whispers, barely audible, as if coming from the shadows. She dismissed it as her imagination. But when one of her friends, Sarah, suddenly screamed, they all rushed to her room. Sarah claimed she saw a figure standing at the foot of her bed, but when they checked, there was nothing there. The vanishing. The next morning, they realized one of their friends, Jake, was missing. His bed was untouched, and his belongings were still in the room. Panic set in as they searched the house, calling his name, but there was no response. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if mocking them. Emily started to feel a sense of dread, realizing they were not alone. The house seemed to be alive, watching their every move. The basement desperate to find Jake, the group decided to explore the basement. The stairs creaked under their weight as they descended into the darkness. The air was thick with a musty smell, and the temperature dropped noticeably. Emily's heart raced as they reached the bottom. The basement was filled with old, broken furniture and cobwebs, but in the far corner, they found a door slightly ajar. The whispers were louder here, almost deafening. Trembling, Emily pushed the door open, revealing a room filled with strange symbols and a large, dusty mirrors. The mirror seemed out of place, its surface covered in grime. But as Emily wiped it clean, she gasped. Reflected in the mirror were not just their own images, but shadows of figures standing behind them. The whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, all speaking in a language they couldn't understand. Suddenly, the room grew colder, and the shadows in the mirror began to move. Emily backed away in fear, but the door slammed shut behind them. They were trapped. The shadows embrace. The shadows in the mirror started to seep out, taking form in the room. Emily and her friends huddled together, terrified. The shadows moved slowly, deliberately, as if savoring their fear. One by one, the figures reached out to touch them, and with each touch, a friend would scream and vanish, leaving only a shadowy outline on the floor. Emily felt paralyzed, unable to move or speak. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if the house itself was feeding off their terror. Emily's escape. With only Emily and Sarah left, they knew they had to escape. The door to the basement was still shut, but Emily noticed a small window near the ceiling. She helped Sarah climb up, and with great effort, they managed to pry it open. Sarah climbed out first, and as Emily prepared to follow, she felt a cold hand grip her ankle. She looked back to see a shadow pulling her back into the darkness. With all her strength, Emily kicked free and scrambled through the window, falling onto the grass outside. The curse. Emily and Sarah ran as fast as they could, not daring to look back. They made it to the edge of the property and collapsed, gasping for breath. But even as they caught their breath, they noticed something strange. The whispers hadn't stopped. They were quieter now, but still there, echoing in their minds. Emily realized with horror that they hadn't truly escaped. The house had marked them, and its curse would follow them wherever they went. The final nightmare days passed, but the whispers persisted. Sarah was the first to succumb, unable to bear the constant torment. Emily found her one morning, lifeless, with a shadowy outline on the floor beside her bed. Emily knew she was next. The whispers were driving her mad, filling her dreams with nightmarish visions of the house and the shadows. She tried to resist, but the house's hold on her was too strong. She knew it was only a matter of time before it claimed her too. The return. In a desperate attempt to end the curse, Emily returned to the house alone. She knew it was a risk, but she had no choice. The whispers guided her back to the basement, to the mirror. She stood before it, staring at her reflection, now accompanied by countless shadows. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The shadows didn't answer, but she knew. They wanted her. Emily closed her eyes, accepting her fate. When she opened them again, she was no longer alone. The house had claimed its final victim. Story 3. The New Beginning. Ava's relocation to the small, quiet town was meant to be a fresh start. The old house she inherited from a distant relative was dilapidated but full of potential. As she unpacked, the locals whispered warnings about the house's dark history, but Ava dismissed them as superstition. The first night, however, an unsettling feeling crept over her. Shadows seemed to move in the corners of her vision, and the house felt colder than it should have been. The strange diary. The second night, as Ava explored the attic, she stumbled upon an old, dusty journal hidden in a corner. The pages were brittle and yellowed, detailing the life of a woman named Eliza who had lived there decades ago. Eliza's entries grew increasingly frantic, describing a malevolent presence she named Muji. Ava was intrigued but skeptical, chalking it up to Eliza's overactive imagination. Haunting begins. As days passed, Ava experienced strange phenomena. Doors creaked open on their own, and she frequently heard whispers in the dead of night. One morning, she found the journal open on the floor, with a new entry written in a shaky hand. It warned of Muji's wrath, describing chilling encounters with the spirit. Ava's skepticism began to wane as the disturbances grew more frequent and aggressive. The legend unveiled. Determined to uncover the truth, Ava visited the local historian, Mr. Caldwell. He recounted the legend of Muji, a vengeful spirit who had once been a resident of the house. According to the lore, Muji was wronged by someone close to her and had been driven mad with rage. The historian explained that Muji sought revenge on anyone who occupied the house, leading to numerous disappearances and deaths. Rising terrors. That night, Ava encountered Muji's fury firsthand. She awoke to find her room covered in strange symbols and felt an icy presence in her bed. The whispers from before turned into growls, and she saw a dark figure hovering at the edge of her vision. Exhausted and frightened, Ava realized that Muji was not just a figment of her imagination, but a real and dangerous entity. The ritual. In a bid to end the torment, Ava decided to perform a ritual described in the journal. The ritual required specific items and incantations meant to appease the spirit. As she set up the ritual space, the house seemed to react violently. The temperature dropped sharply, and the walls seemed to pulse with anger. Despite her fear, Ava continued, hoping the ritual would bring peace. The exorcist's arrival. Desperate for help, Ava contacted a renowned paranormal investigator, Dr. Reynolds. He arrived with his team, bringing specialized equipment to detect and communicate with spirits. Dr. Reynolds confirmed the presence of Muji and prepared for an exorcism. He warned Ava that Muji's power was immense and that the exorcism would be perilous. Ava, though terrified, felt she had no other choice. The exorcism. The exorcism began with intense rituals and chants. The house roared with supernatural energy, and the walls were covered in shifting shadows. Muji's rage was palpable, and the temperature plunged even further. The team struggled to contain the spirit's fury, and Ava felt the oppressive force trying to break her will. The process was grueling, testing everyone's strength and resolve. The climax. During the climax of the exorcism, Muji's presence became overwhelmingly violent. Objects flew through the air, and the house shook as if it were alive. Ava and Dr. Reynolds fought to maintain control, their voices nearly lost in the cacophony of supernatural noise. For a moment, Ava feared the exorcism might fail, leaving them at Muji's mercy. The aftermath. As dawn approached, the house fell eerily silent. The exorcism had succeeded, but the toll it took was evident. Ava felt an uneasy calm as she packed her belongings, her experience leaving her deeply shaken. She decided to leave the house and never return. The legend of Muji, a haunting reminder of the darkness she had faced. The house remained, its story a chilling testament to the malevolent spirit that once resided within. Story 4. Echoes of the Abandoned Asylum. The arrival. Alex pulled up to the abandoned asylum, its looming presence casting long shadows under the setting sun. Rumors about the place had circulated for years, mysterious disappearances, eerie noises, and sightings of ghostly figures. Determined to uncover the truth, Alex pushed open the rusty gates and walked up the crumbling steps. The asylum's heavy doors creaked as they swung open, revealing a dark, dust-filled lobby. Alex's flashlight flickered as they stepped inside, the air thick with decay. Exploring the hallways. The asylum's corridors stretched endlessly, lined with peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. Alex passed by old patient rooms, each one a chilling reminder of the past. Old medical records lay scattered on the floor, some pages torn and yellowed. As Alex explored, a cold draft whispered through the hallways, making the shadows dance and creating an unsettling atmosphere. Strange sounds. The silence was shattered by a series of unsettling noises. Soft whispers, distant footsteps, and a chilling scream that echoed through the halls. Alex stopped in their tracks, trying to pinpoint the source. The sounds seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, heightening the sense of dread. To the first encounter, in the dim light, Alex saw a shadowy figure at the end of the hallway. The figure seemed to be watching, its presence cold and menacing. When Alex approached, the figure vanished into thin air. Heart racing, Alex looked around, but found nothing but empty hallways and darkness. The diary. While searching through an old office, Alex discovered a dusty diary. The pages were filled with disturbing entries from a former patient. The writings spoke of brutal treatments and strange experiments conducted by the asylum's staff. The final entry described a terrifying encounter with a malevolent entity that seemed to control the asylum. The haunting vision. As Alex read the diary, the air grew colder and the room around them began to blur. Alex was suddenly engulfed in a vision, an unsettling scene of patients being tortured, their cries filling the air. The vision was so vivid it felt real, leaving Alex shaken as they were pulled back to the present. The descent. Determined to find more answers, Alex descended into the basement. The stairs creaked ominously and the air grew colder. The basement was a labyrinth of dark, narrow tunnels. Alex's flashlight revealed grotesque symbols etched into the walls and old, rusted equipment that hinted at sinister experiments. The confrontation. Deep in the basement, Alex encountered the malevolent entity described in the diary. It materialized as a nightmarish figure with hollow eyes and a distorted face. The entity seemed to feed off Alex's fear, its presence growing more oppressive. It let out a bone-chilling scream, its voice a chorus of the asylum's tormented souls. The escape panicked. Alex tried to escape, but the asylum's layout seemed to shift, trapping them in a nightmarish maze. The walls closed in, and the corridors twisted, leading Alex in circles. The entity's laughter echoed through the maze, adding to the terror. With a final burst of adrenaline, Alex spotted an exit and sprinted toward it. The aftermath. Alex emerged from the asylum, breathless and traumatized. The night air felt like a cruel contrast to the asylum's oppressive darkness. As they looked back at the asylum, they saw the figure once more, watching from the shadows. The asylum's grip on Alex was unshakable, and as they drove away, they couldn't escape the feeling that the asylum's echoes would haunt them forever.
Where the barren deserts and vast plains hold stories of the dead and the living. Deep in the heart of this state lies Palo Duro Canyon, a natural wonder of red rock formations and steep cliffs. But within its beauty lurks an unspeakable terror, whispered about for generations. Our tale begins with three friends, Josh, Sarah, and Pete, who, on a dare, decide to camp at the canyon, ignoring the local warnings that no one should stay overnight. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the canyon's towering cliffs seemed to close in on them, trapping them in a world untouched by time. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional gust of wind that echoed through the narrow passes like the cry of a banshee. Pete set up the tent, while Josh gathered firewood. Sarah, the bravest of the three, ventured further to explore a nearby cave. The locals had always spoken of the cave, saying that it led into the deepest parts of the earth, to a place where the land itself screamed in agony. She didn't believe in such nonsense, not until she entered. The darkness inside the cave was unnatural, so thick it swallowed the light from her flashlight. As Sarah moved deeper, her footsteps echoed back at her, but something was off. The echoes seemed delayed, as if they were not her own. Suddenly, she heard a whisper. It wasn't a voice she recognized. It was low, guttural, and full of malice. "Turn back," it seemed to say, but Sarah was stubborn. She brushed it off as the wind and moved forward. The air grew colder with each step, her breath becoming visible in the dim light. She could feel something watching her, but when she turned, nothing was there. She quickened her pace, the cave twisting and turning until she came upon an old, rusted gate, half buried in the stone. The gate was covered in strange symbols, ancient markings that looked like they had been scratched into the rock by desperate hands. As she reached out to touch the gate, the whisper came again, louder this time, but clearer. "Leave! Now!" But it was too late. The moment her fingers grazed the cold metal, the ground beneath her trembled, and the gate groaned open on its own. Back at the camp, Josh and Pete were growing uneasy. The fire crackled, but gave off little warmth, and the stars overhead seemed dimmer, as if a veil had been drawn over the sky. "Sarah should have been back by now," Josh said, pacing nervously. Just as Pete was about to suggest they go look for her, Sarah appeared from the darkness. But something was different. Her eyes were wide, and she stood unnaturally still, as if frozen in place. "Sarah!" Josh called, but she didn't respond. She simply stared at them, her lips barely moving, whispering something they couldn't hear. As Josh stepped closer, a foul smell filled the air, like rotting flesh. He stopped in his tracks. "Sarah, what's going on?" Her lips moved faster now, whispering, but the words were in a language neither of them could understand. Pete grabbed Josh's arm. "Something's wrong with her, man. We need to leave." But before they could move, Sarah collapsed. Her body convulsed violently on the ground, her eyes rolling back into her head as her limbs twisted in unnatural directions. The air around them grew colder, and the whispers began. First one voice, then another, until it seemed the entire canyon was alive with the sound of distant, tormented souls. Pete grabbed a flashlight and aimed it toward the cave Sarah had come from. In the distance, a figure emerged, tall and gaunt, its face hidden beneath a hood. It moved slowly, its footsteps silent on the rocky ground, but it radiated a malevolent energy that made their skin crawl. As it came closer, the air itself seemed to thin, as if the figure was sucking the very life out of the canyon. Without warning, Sarah's body was lifted into the air by an unseen force, her mouth gaping wide as a shadowy mist began to pour out of her. The mist twisted and writhed in the air, forming the shape of countless faces, each one screaming in silent agony. Josh and Pete could only watch in horror as the mist began to form a circle around them, trapping them inside. The figure stepped closer, its hood falling back to reveal a face not of this world. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its skull, with empty black eyes that seemed to stare into their very souls. It raised a bony hand, and the mist thickened, swirling faster and faster until Josh and Pete felt as though they were being suffocated by it. They tried to run, but their bodies wouldn't move. The whispers were deafening now, the voices overlapping and blending into one chaotic sound that made it impossible to think. The figure stepped closer still, until it was mere inches from Josh. It leaned in, its cold breath brushing against his ear, and spoke in a voice that was both human and otherworldly. "You were warned." In an instant, the mist collapsed inward, pulling Sarah, Josh, and Pete into its depths. The canyon fell silent once more, the wind no longer howling through the passes. The fire at their camp flickered weakly before extinguishing completely, leaving no trace of their presence. To this day, locals say that if you camp near the cave at Palo Duro Canyon, you can still hear the whispers of those who disappeared. Some say the gate to the underworld was never truly closed, and the souls trapped within still seek a way out. No one has dared to find out if the legend is true. No one, except those who never returned. The haunting of Palo Duro Canyon weeks passed, and the disappearance of Josh, Sarah, and Pete became a local mystery. Search parties combed the canyon, but there was no sign of them. No footprints, no gear, not even the remains of the fire they had built. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed them whole, but the whispers didn't stop. One night, a park ranger named Dale was making his routine patrol near the canyon's edge. He had heard the stories growing up, but never believed them. He had spent years working in the area, guiding tourists, rescuing hikers who lost their way, and dealing with the occasional wild animal. But something had always felt off about the canyon after dark. The air was heavier, and the silence was unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. That night, as Dale stood at the edge of the canyon, staring down into the dark abyss below, he heard it. Faint at first, like the rustle of leaves in the wind, but it grew louder. Whispers. His skin prickled, and a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. He instinctively reached for his flashlight and swept the beam across the barren landscape. But there was nothing. "Who's there?" he called, his voice sounding small and hollow in the vast canyon. The whispers stopped for a moment, and Dale could feel the hair on the back of his neck standing up. He swallowed hard and took a step back. But then the whispers returned, this time clearer, like they were right behind him. "Help us." Dale spun around, but again, nothing. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread, his instincts screaming at him to leave, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. His heart pounded in his chest as he forced himself to move, one slow step at a time, away from the canyon's edge. But before he could make it back to his vehicle, the ground beneath him shook violently, and a fissure opened in the earth just a few feet ahead. From it, thick, black mist began to pour out, rising like smoke from a fire. The mist twisted and writhed, forming into the vague shapes of human figures, shadowy and indistinct, but unmistakably human. Dale's flashlight flickered as the temperature dropped sharply. The figures seemed to be trying to speak, their mouths moving silently, but no sound came out. Dale watched, paralyzed with fear, as one of the figures slowly raised its arm, pointing directly at him. "Leave this place," a voice finally whispered. But it was not a warning. It was a command. Dale stumbled backward, his flashlight slipping from his hand and clattering to the ground. The beam flickered out as the mist surged forward, enveloping him. He couldn't see, couldn't breathe. The whispers filled his ears, growing louder, more desperate. "We are trapped. Help us!" Dale fought against the overwhelming sense of panic, gasping for air as he tried to push his way through the mist. His fingers brushed against something solid, cold, metallic. It was the gate Sarah had found deep in the cave. He hadn't seen it in person before, but he knew the stories. The gate stood before him, half buried in the rocky ground, its ancient symbols glowing faintly in the darkness. Dale could feel the power radiating from it, something ancient and evil, something that had been sealed away for centuries. But the whispers didn't stop. The figures pressed closer, their ghostly hands reaching for him, pulling at his clothes, tugging at his limbs. "Open it," they whispered. "Let us out." Dale's mind raced. He knew that whatever was behind that gate wasn't meant to be freed, but the pressure was unbearable. The voices were inside his head now, louder than ever, drowning out all reason. "Open it," they chanted, over and over again, their faces twisted in agony. With trembling hands, Dale reached for the gate. His fingers closed around the cold metal, and for a brief moment, everything was silent. The mist froze, the figures stopped moving, and the canyon seemed to hold its breath. But the moment Dale touched the gate, the earth shuddered beneath his feet, and a deafening roar echoed through the canyon. The gate swung open with a violent crash, releasing a torrent of black mist that shot up into the sky like a plume of smoke. The figures let out a collective scream, their faces contorting in agony as they were pulled back into the darkness, one by one, until the canyon was silent once more. Dale collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, his body shaking uncontrollably. The mist was gone. The gate was open, and the whispers had finally stopped. But something had changed. He could feel it in the air, in the way the ground trembled beneath him, in the way the stars seemed to dim overhead. Something had been released. Dale staggered to his feet, his legs weak and unsteady. He glanced around the canyon, but there was no sign of the figures, no trace of the mist. The gate stood wide open, its rusted hinges creaking in the wind, and beyond it, a darkness deeper than anything Dale had ever seen. He didn't know what lay beyond the gate, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever it was free now, and it was coming. The next morning, Dale's truck was found abandoned at the edge of Palo Duro Canyon. The search team found no sign of him, just like Josh, Sarah, and Pete before him. The gate remains open, hidden deep within the canyon, waiting for its next victim. And the whispers. They've started again. The haunting of Palo Duro Canyon. Days passed since Dale's disappearance, and whispers of the curse spread like wildfire throughout the town. People started to avoid Palo Duro Canyon, even in the daytime. Stories circulated about unnatural sounds echoing from deep within the canyon at night, of screams that didn't belong to any living soul. But despite the fear, there were always those brave or foolish enough to venture where others wouldn't. One of those people was Carlos, a seasoned paranormal investigator with a reputation for exploring the most haunted places in Texas. He had heard about the strange events at Palo Duro and couldn't resist the pull of uncovering the truth. Armed with state-of-the-art equipment, infrared cameras, EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, recorders, and a deep sense of skepticism, he set out to document what had really happened. Carlos arrived at the canyon just before sunset, determined to find the gate and capture any supernatural activity. The landscape was eerily quiet, and as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the cliffs, a sense of unease settled over him. He made his way toward the cave, relying on GPS coordinates he had pulled from a local hiker's map. Every step felt heavier, as if the air itself was pressing down on him. He set up his equipment near the cave entrance, positioning his cameras to record any movement, and placed the EVP recorder nearby. He switched everything on and sat down to wait, his eyes scanning the surrounding cliffs for any sign of movement. Hours passed in silence. Nothing. Just as Carlos was beginning to think the legends were just exaggerated stories, his EVP recorder crackled to life. A faint, disembodied voice whispered, "Help." Carlos's heart skipped a beat. He leaned closer to the recorder, playing the sound back, amplifying it through his headphones. The voice was unmistakable, pleading, desperate. "Help us," the voice repeated, followed by a long, guttural moan. He tried to pinpoint the source of the voice, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Suddenly, his infrared camera started flashing wildly, capturing rapid movement just outside the cave. Carlos jumped to his feet, his flashlight sweeping across the barren landscape. In the darkness, he saw it. A faint, shadowy figure moving toward the canyon's edge. It was barely visible, almost blending into the night, but it moved with purpose. He grabbed his camera and followed, heart pounding, adrenaline surging through his veins. The figure disappeared into the mist, but the whispers grew louder, surrounding him from every direction. The air felt charged with electricity, and the ground beneath him seemed to vibrate with an unseen force. Carlos continued onward, deeper into the canyon, until he reached the same rusted gate that had swallowed the others. It stood there, half buried in the earth, exactly as the stories described, its ancient symbols glowing faintly in the moonlight. The gate was wide open, a gaping maw into an abyss of darkness. Cold sweat trickled down Carlos's neck as he stood before it, every instinct telling him to turn back. But he couldn't. He had come too far. With shaking hands, he raised his camera and filmed the gate. The whispers intensified, louder and more distinct now. They weren't just echoes. They were voices, hundreds of them, calling out to him from beyond the gate. "Join us!" they beckoned, their voices seductive and chilling. "Open the way!" Carlos reached out, almost hypnotized, his fingers brushing the cold metal of the gate. The moment his skin made contact, the ground beneath him trembled violently, and the canyon seemed to groan in protest. He stumbled back, but it was too late. The mist poured from the gate, thicker and darker than before, swirling around him like a living entity. The shadowy figures began to emerge once more, their faces twisted in agony, their bodies contorted in unnatural ways. They surrounded Carlos, their hollow eyes staring. Gate was open, and the whispers had finally stopped. But something had changed. He could feel it in the air, in the way the ground trembled beneath him, in the way the stars seemed to dim overhead. Something had been released. Dale staggered to his feet, his legs weak and unsteady. He glanced around the canyon, but there was no sign of the figures, no trace of the mist. The gate stood wide open, its rusted hinges creaking in the wind, and beyond it, a darkness deeper than anything Dale had ever seen. He didn't know what lay beyond the gate, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever it was free now, and it was coming. The next morning, Dale's truck was found abandoned at the edge of Palo Duro Canyon. The search team found no sign of him, just like Josh, Sarah, and Pete before him. The gate remains open, hidden deep within the canyon, waiting for its next victim. And the whispers. They've started again. The haunting of Palo Duro Canyon. Days passed since Dale's disappearance, and whispers of the curse spread like wildfire throughout the town. People started to avoid Palo Duro Canyon, even in the daytime. Stories circulated about unnatural sounds echoing from deep within the canyon at night, of screams that didn't belong to any living soul. But despite the fear, there were always those brave or foolish enough to venture where others wouldn't. One of those people was Carlos, a seasoned paranormal investigator with a reputation for exploring the most haunted places in Texas. He had heard about the strange events at Palo Duro and couldn't resist the pull of uncovering the truth. Armed with state-of-the-art equipment, infrared cameras, EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, recorders, and a deep sense of skepticism, he set out to document what had really happened. Carlos arrived at the canyon just before sunset, determined to find the gate and capture any supernatural activity. The landscape was eerily quiet, and as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the cliffs, a sense of unease settled over him. He made his way toward the cave, relying on GPS coordinates he had pulled from a local hiker's map. Every step felt heavier, as if the air itself was pressing down on him. He set up his equipment near the cave entrance, positioning his cameras to record any movement, and placed the EVP recorder nearby. He switched everything on and sat down to wait, his eyes scanning the surrounding cliffs for any sign of movement. Hours passed in silence. Nothing. Just as Carlos was beginning to think the legends were just exaggerated stories, his EVP recorder crackled to life. A faint, disembodied voice whispered, "Help." Carlos's heart skipped a beat. He leaned closer to the recorder, playing the sound back, amplifying it through his headphones. The voice was unmistakable, pleading, desperate. "Help us," the voice repeated, followed by a long, guttural moan. He tried to pinpoint the source of the voice, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Suddenly, his infrared camera started flashing wildly, capturing rapid movement just outside the cave. Carlos jumped to his feet, his flashlight sweeping across the barren landscape. In the darkness, he saw it. A faint, shadowy figure moving toward the canyon's edge. It was barely visible, almost blending into the night, but it moved with purpose. He grabbed his camera and followed, heart pounding, adrenaline surging through his veins. The figure disappeared into the mist, but the whispers grew louder, surrounding him from every direction. The air felt charged with electricity, and the ground beneath him seemed to vibrate with an unseen force. Carlos continued onward, deeper into the canyon, until he reached the same rusted gate that had swallowed the others. It stood there, half buried in the earth, exactly as the stories described, its ancient symbols glowing faintly in the moonlight. The gate was wide open, a gaping maw into an abyss of darkness. Cold sweat trickled down Carlos's neck as he stood before it, every instinct telling him to turn back, but he couldn't. He had come too far. With shaking hands, he raised his camera and filmed the gate. The whispers intensified, louder and more distinct now. They weren't just echoes, they were voices, hundreds of them, calling out to him from beyond the gate. "Join us," they beckoned, their voices seductive and chilling. "Open the way." Carlos reached out, almost hypnotized, his fingers brushing the cold metal of the gate. The moment his skin made contact, the ground beneath him trembled violently, and the canyon seemed to groan in protest. He stumbled back, but it was too late. The mist poured from the gate, thicker and darker than before, swirling around him like a living entity. The shadowy figures began to emerge once more, their faces twisted in agony, their bodies contorted in unnatural ways. They surrounded Carlos, their hollow eyes staring into his, their voices filling his head. "You shouldn't have come here," one of them whispered, its face inches from his own. Carlos tried to move, but his feet felt like they were rooted to the ground. The mist was suffocating, pressing in on him from all sides. He could feel the cold hands of the figures clawing at him, pulling him toward the gate. His camera fell from his grasp, landing with a dull thud on the rocky ground. "I'm sorry," Carlos gasped, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of whispers. "I didn't mean to." But the figures showed no mercy. They dragged him closer to the gate, their faces expressionless, their movements mechanical. The darkness beyond the gate seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, as if something far worse than the figures awaited him on the other side. Just as Carlos was about to be pulled into the abyss, the ground shook violently, and the figures suddenly stopped. For a brief moment, everything was still. Then, from the depths of the canyon, a deafening roar echoed through the night, a sound so powerful that it made the very air vibrate. Carlos was thrown backward, landing hard on the rocky ground. The figures dissolved into the mist, retreating back through the gate, which slammed shut with a thunderous boom. The whispers faded, leaving behind an eerie, suffocating silence. Gasping for breath, Carlos scrambled to his feet, grabbing his camera and running as fast as his legs would carry him. He didn't stop until he was back at his car, his hands trembling as he fumbled with the keys. He sped away from the canyon, never once looking back. The next morning, Carlos reviewed the footage. The whispers were there, the shadows, the gate. But the final moments, when the ground shook and the gate slammed shut, were missing. The camera had gone dark, as if something had deliberately erased the evidence. Carlos left Palo Duro that day, but he could still feel the weight of the canyon pressing down on him. He knew that whatever was behind that gate wasn't finished. It had been disturbed, awakened, and it was waiting for someone else to open it. The legend of Palo Duro Canyon lives on, a dark and terrible secret buried deep in the heart of Texas. Some say the gate still stands, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to answer the whispers. The haunting of Palo Duro Canyon. Carlos couldn't sleep for weeks after his escape from the canyon. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the whispers, faint at first, but growing louder as he drifted off. They called to him, just as they had in the canyon, pulling at his mind, urging him to return. His dreams were filled with images of the gate, of the shadowy figures, of the mist that seemed alive. But worst of all was the roar, the deep, primal sound that shook him to his core. It haunted him, echoing in his mind even during the day. He had tried to forget what he had seen, tried to convince himself that it had been a trick of the mind, that his imagination had gotten the better of him. But the footage he had captured was undeniable. The whispers were real. The shadows were real. And the gate was real. As the weeks passed, Carlos became more and more obsessed with the canyon. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unfinished, that he had narrowly escaped something far worse than he could comprehend. He spent hours poring over the footage, listening to the EVP recordings, trying to find some clue, some explanation for what had happened. But the more he searched, the more questions he uncovered. Who or what was behind the gate? What were the figures trying to say? And why had the ground shaken so violently just before the gate slammed shut? Carlos knew he had to find answers, but he also knew he couldn't return to the canyon alone. That's when he reached out to Marla, a well-known paranormal investigator who had been researching Texas legends for years. She had heard of Palo Duro Canyon, of course. Everyone in the paranormal community had, but even she was wary of going there. Still, Carlos convinced her to join him. There was something in his voice, a sense of urgency, that made her believe there was more to the story than just another local legend. A few days later, Carlos and Marla set off for Palo Duro, this time armed with more equipment, including thermal imaging cameras and sensitive sound detectors. As they drove closer to the canyon, the unease that had settled over Carlos since his last visit grew stronger. His palms were sweaty on the steering wheel, and every nerve in his body screamed for him to turn back. But he couldn't. He needed to know what lay beyond the gate. They arrived at the canyon just after sunset. The wind howled through the cliffs, and the temperature had dropped sharply, even for Texas. Marla immediately sensed the heaviness in the air, the kind of oppressive atmosphere she had only experienced in places with a deep history of pain and suffering. They set up their equipment near the cave entrance and waited. As the hours dragged on, the whispers returned, faint but unmistakable. Marla's equipment began picking up strange readings, fluctuations in temperature, sudden bursts of static on the audio recorders. The air felt thick, charged with electricity, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble with anticipation. It wasn't long before the shadowy figures appeared again, moving slowly toward the gate. Marla's thermal camera picked up the movement, but when she checked the footage, there was nothing, just empty space. She frowned, glancing at Carlos, who had gone pale. "They're here," he whispered, his voice shaky. Marla looked back at the shadows, her pulse quickening. What do they want? Carlos shook his head. I don't know, but last time, they wanted me to open the gate. As if on cue, the ground beneath them began to shake, just like before. The gate stood before them, half buried in the earth, its symbols glowing faintly in the moonlight. Marla's equipment started malfunctioning. Her cameras flickered, her audio recorders went dead. But the whispers continued, louder now, more insistent. Open it, they pleaded. Let us out. Marla took a step back, her heart pounding. Carlos, we can't. Before she could finish, the ground shook violently, and a fissure opened in the earth, just like the night Dale had disappeared. From the crack, the same thick black mist poured out, twisting and writhing as it formed into human shapes. The figures surrounded them, their hollow eyes fixed on Carlos and Marla. We've disturbed it, Carlos muttered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the wind howling through the canyon. It's awake. Marla's breath caught in her throat as the shadows drew closer, their faces twisted in agony, their hands outstretched as if begging for release. What is it? She whispered. I don't know, Carlos replied, his voice shaking, but it's been waiting for centuries. The ground trembled again, more violently this time, and the mist surged forward, enveloping them in a suffocating cloud of darkness. Carlos and Marla tried to run, but the shadows were faster, their cold, bony hands grabbing at them, pulling them toward the gate. The roar returned, a deafening, soul-shaking sound that reverberated through the canyon as if the earth itself was crying out in pain. The mist thickened, and the darkness seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. And then, from deep within the canyon, something began to emerge. A figure, colossal, ancient and shrouded in shadow, rose from the depths of the earth. Its form was indistinct, but its presence was undeniable. It towered above them, its eyes burning with a cold, malevolent fire. The whispers ceased, replaced by an eerie silence, as if the entire world had paused to witness the horror that had been unleashed. Carlos and Marla could only watch in terror as the entity moved toward them, its footsteps shaking the ground. Its face was a void, a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to consume everything in its path. And as it drew closer, Carlos finally understood. The gate had not been meant to keep something out. It had been built to keep something in. The last thing Carlos and Marla saw before the darkness consumed them was the gate, standing wide open, its symbols glowing brighter than ever. The entity had been released, and there would be no stopping it now. The canyon remained silent for days after that. No search parties were sent, no news reports were made. But those who lived nearby swore they could still hear the whispers at night, the voices of the lost souls trapped forever in the darkness of Palo Duro Canyon, and the gate, it still waits.
A group of friends discover an old, abandoned lighthouse on a desolate shore. Rumors say it's haunted, but they decide to explore it for fun. The first night. The friends decide to spend the night inside the lighthouse. As they settle in, strange noises echo through the tower. The unseen force. As the night progresses, one friend goes missing. The others search frantically but only find eerie signs of a struggle. The keeper's diary. They find an old diary belonging to the lighthouse keeper, detailing strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances. The haunting. The friends are tormented by ghostly apparitions and unsettling visions of the lighthouse's past. The descent. The remaining friends decide to descend into the lower levels of the lighthouse, hoping to find their missing companion. The sacrifice. They discover a hidden chamber filled with arcane symbols and realize that a dark ritual is connected to the hauntings. The final escape. The last surviving friend narrowly escapes the lighthouse, but not without a final, terrifying encounter. Story 2. The abandoned shore. The mysterious beach. A couple stumbles upon a secluded beach while on vacation. There's something unsettling about the place, but they decide to stay. The strange tide. They notice that the tide never seems to change, and strange objects start washing ashore. Old toys, rusted tools, and eerie dolls. The vanishing one morning, the husband goes missing after a solo walk along the shore. The wife searches frantically but finds only his footprints leading into the water. The forgotten memories. The wife starts having strange dreams about people she doesn't remember but feels connected to. She realizes these are memories from someone else's life. The lost souls. She discovers that the beach is a gathering place for lost souls who cannot move on, including her missing husband. The forbidden path. Determined to save her husband, the wife follows a hidden path through the forest that leads to an ancient, cursed site. The dark ritual. She finds a group of cultists performing a ritual to bind the souls to the beach forever. She realizes she must stop them to free her husband. The release. The wife interrupts the ritual, breaking the curse, but at a great personal cost. The beach and its lost souls begin to fade away. Story 3. The Whispering Woods. The Strange Silence. A hiker ventures into a dense, remote forest known for its eerie silence. No birds sing, no animals move, and the air is thick with tension. The warnings. The hiker comes across old, weathered signs warning of danger ahead, but the writing is faded and barely legible. The vanishing trail. The path suddenly disappears, leaving the hiker disoriented. They realize they are lost and that something in the woods is watching them. The voices. As night falls, the hiker begins to hear faint whispers coming from all directions, but no one is there. The voices seem to be guiding them deeper into the woods. The abandoned cabin. The hiker stumbles upon an old abandoned cabin deep in the woods. Inside, they find clues about others who have disappeared in these woods. The haunting presence. The hiker realizes the cabin is haunted by the spirits of those who have been lost in the woods. The spirits warn them to leave, but it's already too late. The escape attempt. The hiker makes a desperate attempt to escape the forest, but the trees seem to shift and close in, trapping them inside. The final confrontation. The hiker confronts the malevolent force controlling the woods, leading to a final, harrowing battle for survival.
Starts to unravel as the nightmares become more vivid and intense. He stops sleeping, terrified of what awaits him when he closes his eyes. One day, he discovers a mysterious old diary belonging to his late grandmother. The entries detail a similar experience, a nightmare that would haunt her every night. The last entry warns of a shadowy figure that crosses the boundary between dreams and reality. Arif's nightmares escalate until, one fateful night, the line between his dreams and the real world blurs completely. He wakes up, but the forest is still around him, the fog thicker, and the presence closer than ever. The nightmare has followed him into reality, and now there's no waking up. Arif's screams echo through his empty house, but no one hears. He is trapped forever in a world where nightmares don't end, and waking up is no longer an option. This story can be expanded with eerie descriptions, building a sense of dread and adding shocking twists to keep the reader on edge. Let me know if you'd like to add more details or need help with the narrative. Arif's descent into his nightmares becomes a daily struggle. As the nights go on, his grip on reality begins to weaken. At work, he's caught staring into space, his eyes vacant and distant. Friends and family grow concerned, noticing the dark circles under his eyes and the nervous energy that never seems to leave him. One evening, Arif decides to confront the nightmare head-on. He sets up cameras in his room, hoping to capture any evidence of what's happening while he sleeps. That night, the dream is different. It's darker, colder, and more suffocating than ever before. The trees in the forest seem to lean in closer, their gnarled branches reaching out like twisted hands. The presence is no longer just following. It's breathing down his neck, whispering unintelligible words that send chills down his spine. When he jolts awake, he checks the footage. To his horror, the video shows his sleeping body twitching and turning violently, as if something unseen is attacking him. But it's what happens next that chills him to the core. A shadowy figure, shapeless and dense like smoke, appears at the foot of his bed. It lingers there, watching him, before slowly fading away. Arif realizes that the nightmare is no longer confined to his sleep. It's manifesting in his waking life. Desperate, Arif seeks help from a spiritual healer who tells him that his grandmother's diary was no ordinary journal, but a record of a curse passed down through generations. The nightmare is a malevolent spirit, a jinn that latches onto the fear of its victims and grows stronger with every terrified gasp and every sleepless night. The healer warns Arif that the only way to break the cycle is to confront the entity in his dreams. But Arif isn't sure he has the strength to face something so terrifying. Arif prepares himself for what he hopes will be his final encounter with the nightmare. He drinks a concoction given by the healer that will keep him lucid in his dream, giving him control over the environment. As he falls asleep, he finds himself back in the foggy forest, but this time he's not running. He calls out to the presence, demanding it show itself. The fog parts, revealing a towering shadow with glowing red eyes. A figure so grotesque and monstrous that it defies comprehension. The entity lunges at Arif, its smoky tendrils wrapping around him. The air is thick with the stench of decay, and Arif feels his breath being sucked away. But instead of succumbing to fear, he fights back, reciting the prayers the healer taught him. The forest shakes, the ground cracks, and the shadow begins to disintegrate, releasing an ear-piercing screech as it vanishes into nothingness. Arif wakes up gasping, his body free of scratches and bruises for the first time in weeks. He feels lighter, relieved that the nightmare has finally ended. However, as he rises from his bed, he notices something unsettling. His reflection in the mirror doesn't match his movements. The figure in the glass stands still, its eyes slowly glowing red. Arif realizes with growing dread that the nightmare isn't over. It has found a new way to haunt him, this time from within. The story ends with Arif trapped in a waking nightmare, his reflection watching him, waiting for the moment it can take over. The reader is left with the unsettling realization that some nightmares can't be escaped. They evolve, finding new ways to torment. Arif's mind begins to unravel as he grapples with the horrifying truth. The nightmare has not ended, it has merely changed form. His reflection in the mirror becomes an ever-present reminder of the entity's lingering presence. Whenever Arif glances at a reflective surface, he sees his reflection behaving strangely, smiling when he isn't, blinking when his eyes are wide open, and sometimes just staring back with those eerie, faintly glowing red eyes. Arif's fear grows as his reflection starts to act independently, mocking him with twisted smiles and gestures when no one else is around. The more he tries to avoid mirrors, the more his surroundings seem to conspire against him. Shiny surfaces, glass windows, and even the screen of his turned-off phone reflect back the sinister version of himself. Constantly lurking, waiting, Arif isolates himself, refusing to leave his apartment, his paranoia deepening. He covers every reflective surface, even going as far as to shatter his bathroom mirror, but the distorted version of himself finds new ways to manifest. On his TV screen, on the surface of water in his sink, and even in his dreams. He begins to hear faint whispers in the silence, voices that taunt him with phrases like, "You can't hide forever," and "I'm always watching." One night, exhausted and on the verge of collapse, Arif tries to seek comfort in his grandmother's diary once more, hoping there's something he missed. As he flips through the pages, he notices that the entries are changing. The ink is fresh, and new words appear as if being written before his eyes. The diary now tells of a final confrontation, a warning that the entity feeds on his fear and that it will eventually take his place in the real world. The last line reads, "Only one can remain." Determined not to lose his sanity or his life, Arif sets up a desperate plan. He turns his apartment into a battleground, lining the walls with protective symbols and lighting candles to ward off the darkness. He confronts his reflection directly, daring it to emerge. The room grows colder, and the lights flicker as his reflection steps out of the mirror, becoming fully corporeal. It's Arif's doppelganger, but twisted. Its smile is cruel, and its eyes burn with a malevolent hunger. The two clash violently. Arif's doppelganger is stronger, faster, and seems to anticipate his every move, taunting him with his own voice. As the fight escalates, it becomes clear that the entity is not just trying to kill Arif. It wants to consume him, to fully replace him in the real world. The candles are snuffed out, plunging the room into darkness, illuminated only by the flickering red glow of the creature's eyes. With his strength waning, Arif recalls the healer's words, "It feeds on your fear." Summoning every last ounce of courage, Arif stops fighting physically and instead confronts his terror head-on. He steps toward the creature, refusing to look away, showing no fear. He begins to chant the prayers, louder and more defiantly, until the creature starts to flicker and distort. The entity lets out a bone-chilling scream, thrashing violently as it's pulled back into the mirror. Arif feels a rush of air as the doppelganger is sucked away, shattering the glass into a million pieces. Arif collapses, gasping, feeling the weight of the nightmare lifting from his chest. But as Arif sits amidst the shattered glass, he notices something horrifying. Each shard reflects a different version of him, some screaming, some staring blankly, and others smiling with that all-too-familiar sinister grin. He's won the battle, but not the war. The entity is splintered, but not gone, lurking in every piece of broken glass. Arif lives in constant vigilance, knowing that even the smallest reflection could let the nightmare return. Every mirror is a potential door, every shadow a lurking threat. The nightmare has not been destroyed, just fragmented, always waiting for the moment when fear will invite it back into his reality. Arif's story ends with a chilling reminder. Some nightmares cannot be defeated, only contained. The reflection is never truly gone, just waiting for another crack to slip through. Arif's victory over the doppelganger is hollow. Though the entity is shattered into countless reflections, it has left behind a lingering darkness that shadows Arif's every step. As days pass, he starts noticing unsettling changes in his surroundings. Doors creak open on their own, objects shift positions when he isn't looking, and shadows in his apartment seem unnaturally long and dark, almost as if they're reaching out toward him. Arif's paranoia grows into a consuming obsession. He installs surveillance cameras in every room, determined to catch any sign of the nightmare's return. But the footage offers no comfort, it only deepens his dread. The recordings show faint flickers of movement, brief glimpses of shadowy figures darting just out of sight. On some nights, his own reflection can be seen lingering in mirrors long after he's walked away. As if watching him from the other side, Arif's reflection becomes increasingly malevolent, taking on a life of its own. At first, it's small things. A smile that doesn't match Arif's own, eyes that move independently, tracking him with a predatory gaze. But soon the reflection starts appearing in places it shouldn't. In puddles on the street, in the shiny surface of a spoon, even in the eyes of strangers passing by. It's everywhere, always watching, always waiting. One night, Arif dreams of a vast, endless corridor of mirrors, each reflecting a different, twisted version of himself. He runs down the corridor, but the reflections begin to step out, one by one, their hands reaching for him. They pull him into the glass, and he finds himself trapped, staring out from inside a mirror, banging desperately as the nightmare version of himself grins back at him from the outside. Arif wakes up screaming, drenched in sweat, but the terror feels too real. He rushes to the bathroom, staring at his reflection, waiting for it to move. It does. The reflection smiles slowly, eyes glowing faintly red, before mouthing words that Arif can't hear but instinctively understands. It's your turn. Arif's sense of reality continues to deteriorate. He stops eating, barely sleeps, and refuses to leave his apartment. He tries to cover all the mirrors again, but something always uncovers them. Sometimes he wakes up to find the sheets pulled away. Other times, they're ripped apart, as if clawed by unseen hands. The reflection taunts him, sometimes whispering his deepest fears and failures, sometimes simply staring with a knowing, sinister smile. Arif's last shred of hope is to destroy the mirrors completely, but no matter how many he breaks, the reflection always returns, finding a new surface, a new way to appear. One day, exhausted and broken, Arif sees his reflection not in a mirror, but in the reflection of his own eyes in a photograph. The eyes move, blinking and smirking, confirming his worst fear. The entity has now become a part of him, embedded in his very being. Arif decides he can't live like this any longer. Armed with every prayer, charm, and talisman he's collected, he prepares for one final showdown. He smashes every reflective surface in his apartment, leaving just one mirror in the center of the room, surrounded by a circle of salt and candles. He stares into it, ready to face the entity once and for all. The room grows unbearably cold, and the candles flicker as the reflection begins to change. The twisted doppelganger emerges, but this time it's not alone. Every mirror he's ever shattered, every reflection he's ever seen, comes pouring out. An army of nightmarish versions of himself. They circle him, chanting in a language he doesn't understand, their voices merging into a deafening cacophony. Arif fights back, reciting every prayer he knows. But the reflections close in, their hands reaching, pulling. He feels himself being dragged toward the mirror, his body growing numb as the entity starts to consume him, replacing his soul with darkness. Just as he feels himself slipping away, Arif gathers the last of his strength, shattering the final mirror with a desperate scream. When the dust settles, Arif is alone in the wreckage of his apartment, surrounded by broken glass. The candles have burned out, and the room is silent. But as Arif looks around, he sees faint ghostly images of his twisted reflections trapped within each shard. He has managed to trap the entities back in the glass, but at a price. His mind is fractured, just like the mirrors around him. Arif lives on, but he's forever haunted. Every time he glimpses his reflection, no matter how small or fleeting, he sees the nightmare lurking back at him, waiting for the day when the glass will break again. The story ends with Arif staring into a tiny piece of broken mirror, his reflection smiling back, whispering, "I'm still here." The nightmare is never truly over. It's merely waiting for its next opportunity. Arif tries to piece his life back together, but the fractured reflections haunt him at every turn. He avoids mirrors entirely, but it's not enough. The entity's presence is no longer confined to glass. It seems to seep into everything. Shadows flicker at the edges of his vision, and he hears faint echoes of laughter and whispers just beyond the reach of his senses. Arif's apartment, once a sanctuary, now feels like a prison. Every corner holds a sense of dread, and every flicker of light seems to hint at something lurking just beyond. He begins to see his twisted reflection, not only in mirrors, but in other people's eyes, in the shiny surface of his phone, and even in his dreams, where it grows more vivid and threatening each night. One evening, Arif decides to venture out, hoping that being around other people might provide some respite. But the outside world has changed too. Faces in the crowd seem distorted, with expressions that are slightly off. Smirks where there should be smiles. Eyes that follow him even after he's passed by. He catches glimpses of himself in shop windows and car mirrors, each reflection more sinister than the last. The worst comes when he sees his doppelganger fully formed, standing across the street, staring directly at him. It's not just a reflection, it's a perfect copy of him, except for the eyes, still glowing faintly red, filled with malice. The figure does move, but simply raises a hand and waves mockingly before disappearing into the crowd. Arif's heart pounds. He feels hunted. No matter where he goes, the doppelganger appears, taunting him, growing bolder each time. It begins to mimic him perfectly, stepping into his actions and even attempting to speak with his voice. Arif tries to confront it, but it always vanishes just before he can reach it, leaving only echoes of laughter that chill him to the bone. Arif's mental state continues to deteriorate. He begins to question his reality, unable to tell what's real and what's a manifestation of the nightmare. The entity starts playing tricks on him, altering small details in his environment. Furniture subtly rearranged, clocks that run backward, and voices that call his name in the dead of night. One evening, Arif receives a call from his mother, but the voice on the other end is his own, distorted and mocking. "You're losing yourself," it taunts. "Soon, there'll be nothing left of you." The call ends abruptly, leaving Arif in a state of panic. He checks his phone, but there's no record of the call. He starts to doubt his sanity, wondering if the doppelganger is not just a separate entity, but a manifestation of his own fractured mind. Arif decides that there's only one way to end this. He must confront the entity in the place where it all began, his grandmother's old abandoned house. Armed with the few remaining items from the healer and the torn pages of the diary, Arif returns to the house, now shrouded in decay and overgrown with vines. The air is thick with the scent of mildew and rot, and the atmosphere is heavy, as if the house itself is alive and watching him. Inside, Arif is met with a nightmarish vision. The walls are covered in mirrors, all reflecting not just him, but countless versions of his doppelganger, each more twisted than the last. They all smile at him, their eyes glowing, and in unison, they speak. Welcome home. Arif knows he has to end this now. He recites the prayers, the symbols he learned, and steps toward the largest mirror, where the true doppelganger stands, arms crossed, waiting. The room grows cold, and the mirrors start to ripple as if made of liquid. The doppelganger steps forward, merging with the real Arif in a terrifying confrontation of will. The battle is a war of minds. Arif against his deepest fears, his guilt, his anger. The doppelganger fights to consume him, feeding on every doubt and every moment of weakness. But Arif fights back with everything he has, forcing the doppelganger into the largest mirror. With a final desperate push, Arif shatters the mirror, trapping the entity inside once more. Arif stands amidst the shattered glass, victorious but broken. The mirrors no longer reflect his doppelganger, but the sense of dread remains. The house is silent, but the atmosphere is still heavy, as if waiting. Arif knows he's won, but the cost has been high. His mind is scarred, and the memories of the nightmare cling to him like a second skin. As he leaves the house, Arif glances at his reflection in a small piece of glass embedded in the ground. For a moment, everything seems normal. But then, just before he looks away, he sees a flicker of red in his eyes. He blinks, and it's gone. But the message is clear. The entity is never truly defeated. It's always waiting, lurking in the edges of reality, ready to slip back in at the first sign of fear. Arif's story ends with him walking away, knowing that while the nightmare may be contained, it will always be a part of him. The reflection in every glass surface is a reminder that some battles are never truly won. They just wait for the next opportunity to begin again.
Arrival. Massive extended version. Zara and Amir drove through the winding roads for what felt like hours, their excitement mounting as they neared the house they'd been waiting for. A sprawling, secluded estate deep in the heart of an ancient forest. The isolation was one of the reasons they had fallen in love with it. Tall trees lined the gravel driveway, their branches twisting together overhead to create a thick canopy, blocking out much of the late afternoon sunlight. The dense foliage swallowed any signs of civilization, leaving them in eerie silence as they pulled up to the gate. The house, looming before them, was far larger than Zara had imagined from the photos. An immense, ivy-covered structure with Gothic arches and towering spires. Its stone walls were dark and weathered, giving the impression that it had stood there for centuries, witnessing countless secrets in the stillness of time. It looked like it had been plucked from an old, forgotten horror movie, a relic of the past, untouched by modern life. Amir was thrilled. "It's even better in person," he exclaimed as he stepped out of the car, his voice echoing through the quiet yard. Zara, however, felt a chill roll down her spine. She hesitated before opening her door, staring up at the house as if it were staring back at her. The air felt heavy, as though it were pressing down on her chest, making it difficult to breathe. As they approached the front door, their footsteps crunched loudly against the gravel, each step echoing unnaturally in the vast silence. The door was massive, made of dark wood, and adorned with iron carvings that depicted strange symbols Zara didn't recognize. They seemed to writhe and twist in the dim light, giving her the unsettling feeling that they were watching her. The key was oversized and ancient, almost too large to fit in her hand, and it took both Zara and Amir to turn it in the lock. When the door finally creaked open, it revealed a vast entryway, larger than any room Zara had ever seen. The air inside was cold, far colder than it should have been for the time of year. Dust hung in the beams of light, filtering through the high, arched windows, and the floor beneath their feet groaned with every step. "This place has character," Zara murmured, her voice tinged with apprehension. She ran her fingers along the nearest wall, feeling the cold stone beneath a layer of dust. Her fingers came away gray and smudged. Amir was already bounding ahead, excitedly exploring the massive house. "Zara, look at this! The ceilings are like 30 feet high." His voice bounced off the cavernous walls, swallowed by the emptiness. Zara wandered deeper into the house, her eyes tracing the intricate woodwork along the staircases and the ancient chandeliers that dangled precariously from the ceilings. Everything felt too quiet, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something. The old furniture, draped in white sheets, stood like ghosts in the dimly lit rooms, and as she passed them, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching her, silently judging her presence. As the evening stretched on, Zara tried to shake the sense of foreboding that had settled in her chest. After a long day of unpacking, she stood by one of the large arched windows, looking out at the dense woods that surrounded them. The shadows between the trees seemed to shift and move, playing tricks on her eyes. But when she blinked, they were still. The first night in the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that amplifies every creak of the floor, every rustle of fabric, every heartbeat. Lying in bed, Zara found herself staring up at the high, vaulted ceiling, her mind racing. Amir had fallen asleep quickly, his soft snores the only sound breaking the silence. But Zara couldn't relax. The darkness in the house felt thicker than normal, oppressive, almost alive. Every now and then, she thought she heard something. A faint, almost imperceptible tapping sound, like someone lightly knocking on the walls from the inside. She strained her ears, holding her breath, but the sound stopped as soon as she focused on it. Just as Zara was beginning to drift into an uneasy sleep, she heard it, a slow, deliberate creak from above. Her eyes snapped open. The noise was coming from the ceiling, directly overhead, as if someone were walking in the attic. The footsteps were light but distinct, echoing through the silence of the house. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. She nudged Amir, who groaned and turned over. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Amir grunted. "It's probably just the house settling, babe. Old places make noises. Go back to sleep." But Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, moving from one end of the attic to the other. It didn't sound like the house settling. It sounded like someone, or something, was up there, pacing, watching. She lay in bed, paralyzed with fear, listening to the faint sounds until they eventually faded into the stillness. But even after the footsteps stopped, the sense of being watched didn't leave her. She felt it. Something, somewhere, was observing her every move, waiting.
Unsettling discoveries. Massive extended version. Days passed, and Zara's unease grew stronger with each passing hour. While Amir busied himself with setting up the house, fixing the lights, moving furniture, Zara found herself wandering aimlessly through the vast, dark hallways, always on edge. It felt like every corner she turned, the house was hiding secrets from her. The air inside the home was cold, much colder than it should have been for early autumn, and no matter how many windows Amir opened or how often the fireplace was lit, the chill never left. One afternoon, Zara decided to explore the attic. It had been nagging at her ever since that first night when she heard the footsteps above their bedroom. The attic door was heavy and old, its hinges rusted and screaming in protest as she pulled it open. A cloud of dust billowed out, and the smell of damp wood and stale air hit her as she climbed the narrow stairs. The attic was larger than she had expected. It stretched out like a dark, forgotten cavern, with wooden beams crisscrossing overhead, casting shadows in the dim light. Old furniture, boxes, and trunks were scattered haphazardly, covered in thick layers of dust as though they hadn't been touched in decades. An eerie silence enveloped the room, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. As she explored, something caught her eye: a set of old portraits hanging on the far wall. The frames were ornate, gilded with gold, but the paintings inside were faded and worn, almost impossible to make out at first. Zara stepped closer, squinting at the figures in the portraits. They depicted a family, parents and children, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, standing solemnly in front of the house. But as she studied them, a cold shiver ran down her spine. The faces were blurred, as though smeared or scratched out intentionally. The more she looked, the more unsettling it became. The figures didn't seem entirely human. There was something off about their proportions, their expressions. She leaned in, staring at the largest portrait of the man, presumably the father, who stood at the center. His eyes seemed to follow her, and though they were nothing more than dark smudges, she felt as though he was staring straight into her soul. Zara's breath quickened. A strange sensation crept over her, like invisible fingers brushing against her skin. She felt watched, not just by the portraits, but by something else. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and a low hum filled her ears like a faint whisper she couldn't quite make out. She stepped back from the portraits, her heart pounding in her chest. Just as she was about to leave the attic, a loud bang echoed through the space. It came from one of the far corners, where an old, decrepit trunk sat. The lid of the trunk was shaking, vibrating as if something inside was trying to get out. Zara froze in place, her mind racing. She wanted to run, but her feet were glued to the floor. Slowly, the lid creaked open, just a fraction of an inch, and Zara could hear it, a soft, muffled whisper coming from inside the trunk. It was faint, barely audible but unmistakable. Someone, or something, was whispering her name. Zara ... Her throat went dry and her body trembled with fear. She backed away, her eyes fixed on the trunk as it slowly, ever so slowly, began to open wider. A cold breeze rushed out, carrying with it the musty scent of decay and something far worse. Something ancient, malevolent. Zara couldn't breathe. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a stack of old books as the whispering grew louder, more insistent. Zara ... The voice was closer now, as if it were right behind her. She spun around, but no one was there. Only the empty attic, silent and dark. The temperature dropped even further, and Zara's breath came out in ragged, visible puffs. Without thinking, she turned and bolted for the stairs, her heart pounding in her ears. As she ran, the whispering followed her, echoing off the walls, growing louder and louder until it felt like it was all around her, inside her head. She didn't stop running until she was out of the attic, slamming the door shut behind her, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She leaned against the door, gasping for breath, her mind reeling. What the hell had just happened? Was it her imagination? Or was there something in the house? Something that didn't want them there?
Zara had been sorting The Hidden Journal, massive extended version. Zara's obsession with the locked door grew as days turned into weeks. She continued to hear strange noises at night, scraping sounds, whispering voices, and the occasional thud that made her heart race. Her curiosity about the locked room intensified, leading her to search the house for any clues that might explain its eerie presence. One day, while exploring the attic once more, Zara stumbled upon an old, dusty trunk hidden beneath a pile of cobweb-covered blankets. Her fingers trembled as she pried it open, revealing a collection of ancient papers and books. At the very top was a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and faded, but still intact. Zara's hands shook as she opened the journal, revealing yellowed, brittle pages covered in a spidery script. The journal belonged to Elias, the previous owner of the house. The early entries described his excitement about moving in with his family, their hopes and dreams for the future. He wrote about the beauty of the home, the potential he saw in it, and his plans for renovations. But as the entries continued, the tone began to shift. Elias's writing became more erratic and desperate. He described strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, cold spots in the house, and disturbing dreams that left him waking in a cold sweat. His final entries were filled with paranoia, detailing his belief that the house was alive, watching him, and that something malevolent was lurking within its walls. One entry caught Zara's eye. "Something has awakened. I can feel it moving through the house, in the walls, beneath the floorboards. It watches us as we sleep. I've tried to leave, but the doors won't open. The windows won't budge. It's keeping us here." Zara's heart pounded as she read on. Elias's last few pages were nearly illegible, filled with frantic scribbles and torn edges. His final entry was a chilling warning. "Do not stay here. Leave before it's too late. The house has claimed us." Zara closed the journal, her hands shaking. The warnings were clear, but she had no intention of leaving. She had to understand what was happening, what Elias had experienced. The journal was just the beginning, and she knew that unlocking the door was the only way to uncover the truth. The Haunting Revelations, massive extended version. The house continued to reveal its dark secrets. Zara's fears grew as she started experiencing more disturbing phenomena. Shadows moved on their own, and objects would inexplicably shift from one place to another. Each night, she would hear the whispering voices, growing more coherent and demanding, echoing through the walls. One particularly eerie evening, while exploring the basement again, Zara found a hidden door behind a stack of old barrels. The door was small and barely noticeable, blending into the wall. She pried it open with a crowbar, revealing a narrow passage leading to a hidden room. The room was tiny, barely large enough for a person to stand in. It was filled with old, broken furniture and tattered books. In the center of the room was an old, iron-bound chest. Zara's breath quickened as she approached it. The chest was covered in strange symbols, similar to those on the locked door. With great effort, she managed to pry it open. Inside, she found a collection of old letters and photographs. The letters were written in a language she didn't understand, but the photographs were more disturbing. They showed the house at various points in history, but in each one, there were shadowy figures lurking in the background, dark, indistinct shapes that seemed to follow the house's occupants. One photograph stood out, a family portrait with Elias and his family. But in the background, a dark figure loomed, almost imperceptible, but undeniably present. It was the same figure she had seen in the portraits in the attic. Zara's hands trembled as she realized the significance. The house was not only haunted, It was actively seeking to ensnare its occupants, feeding off their fear and despair. She had to warn Amir, but he was increasingly dismissive of her concerns, attributing them to stress and fatigue. The Hidden Door, massive extended version. The more Zara uncovered, the more she felt trapped in a nightmare. She spent every waking moment trying to piece together the house's history and the nature of the entities that haunted it. Despite her mounting fears, Amir remained skeptical, attributing her experiences to stress and fatigue. One night, while Amir was away on a business trip, Zara decided to confront the locked door in the basement. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of grim determination, she descended into the cold, damp darkness. She tried to force the door open, but it was stubbornly resistant. The lock refused to budge, no matter how much she pulled or twisted. Frustrated, Zara used a wrench to pry at the edges of the door, and with a loud crack, the lock gave way. As the door creaked open, an overpowering stench of decay and mold wafted out. Zara shone her flashlight inside, revealing a small, dusty room filled with old, rotting furniture and piles of debris. At the center of the room was an old wooden table, on which lay a large bound book covered in strange symbols. Zara approached the table cautiously, her heart racing. She opened the book, revealing pages filled with cryptic symbols and disturbing illustrations. The illustrations depicted rituals and ceremonies, and the symbols were similar to those she had seen throughout the house. One page stood out, a ritual for summoning and binding spirits. Zara's blood ran cold as she realized the implications. The house was not merely haunted, it had been used for dark rituals. The spirits trapped within were not passive, they were actively seeking release. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted. Zara felt an icy chill on the back of her neck and heard the whispering voices grow louder. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision, and the furniture seemed to shift, closing in on her. Panic set in. Zara slammed the book shut and fled from the room, slamming the door behind her. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and she knew that the house's secrets were far darker and more dangerous than she had imagined. The Terrors Unleashed. Massive extended version. The house's malevolent presence grew stronger. Zara's experiences became more intense and frightening. The whispering voices were now clearly calling her name, demanding that she join them in the shadows. The house seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and Zara felt increasingly isolated and trapped. One night, Zara awoke to find her bedroom door wide open, despite having locked it before bed. She felt a presence in the room, watching her. The shadows on the walls seemed to writhe and twist, and she saw dark figures moving in the corners of her vision. Desperate to understand what was happening, Zara researched the house's history. She discovered that it had been built on an ancient site of dark rituals and ceremonies. The land was said to be cursed, and the house had been a focal point for those seeking to summon and control dark forces. As Zara delved deeper, she learned of a ritual performed by the house's original owner to bind and trap malevolent entities. The ritual had failed, and the entities had been trapped within the house, feeding off the fear and despair of its occupants. One night, Zara was jolted awake by a series of loud bangs and crashes coming from the basement. She grabbed a flashlight and cautiously made her way downstairs. The basement was in disarray, with furniture overturned and objects scattered. The air was thick with an oppressive energy. In the center of the room was the old book she had found earlier. It was open to a page detailing a ritual to break the binding and release the trapped entities. Zara's hands shook as she read the instructions. She knew she had to perform the ritual to end the terror, but she also knew it would be dangerous. The descent into darkness, massive extended version. Zara decided to perform the ritual despite the dangers. She gathered the necessary items, candles, incense, and other materials listed in the book, and prepared the basement for the ceremony. Her hands trembled as she set up the ritual space, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. As she began the ritual, the house seemed to come alive with a dark, malevolent energy. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows in the corners of the room danced and writhed. The temperature dropped further, and Zara could see her breath fogging in the cold air. The ritual required her to recite incantations and perform specific movements. As she did so, the room grew darker, and the shadows seemed to coalesce into dark, indistinct shapes. The entities trapped in the house were growing agitated, and Zara could feel their presence closing in on her. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Zara's flashlight fell to the floor, casting erratic beams of light that only served to intensify the horror. The shadows moved closer, and Zara could hear the entities whispering in her ears, their voices growing louder and more insistent. Zara continued the ritual, her voice trembling but determined. As she completed the final incantation, a blinding flash of light erupted from the ritual space. The house shook violently, and Zara was thrown to the final confrontation. Massive extended version. As Zara completed the final incantation of the ritual, the house seemed to erupt into chaos. The walls trembled, and a deep, guttural growl echoed through the air. Shadows swirled violently, and the temperature plummeted further. Zara could barely see through the disorienting whirl of darkness and light. A massive force seemed to press against her, almost as if the house itself was fighting back. The dark entities she had encountered before were now fully materialized, their forms twisted and grotesque. They hovered around her, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. Zara could feel their icy breath on her skin and hear their whispers echoing in her mind. Desperately, she pressed on with the ritual, reciting the ancient words and performing the necessary gestures despite the overwhelming fear and exhaustion. The shadows seemed to pulse with anger, and the room shook with each utterance. Suddenly, one of the entities, a tall, dark figure with a featureless face, advanced toward Zara, its presence exuding pure malevolence. It seemed to be the leader of the group, the most powerful of the trapped spirits. Zara's heart raced as it approached, its dark form stretching and contorting as it moved. In a moment of sheer panic, Zara grabbed a nearby candle and thrust it toward the entity. The flame flickered, and the entity recoiled, hissing and wailing as if in pain. Zara seized the opportunity and intensified her recitation, channeling all her fear and desperation into the ritual. The house shook violently, and a blinding light filled the room. The dark entities screamed and writhed, their forms distorting and dissipating into the light. The oppressive weight of the house seemed to lift, and the temperature began to rise again. Zara fell to her knees, exhausted but relieved, as the light finally faded. The basement was silent, save for the occasional creak of the settling house. Zara looked around, seeing that the shadows had receded and the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. The ritual was complete, and the entities had been banished. A new beginning, massive extended version. The days following the ritual were a time of profound change for Zara and Amir. The house, once a dark and oppressive presence, now felt lighter and more welcoming. The shadows no longer moved on their own, and the whispers had disappeared. The oppressive cold had lifted, and the air felt fresh and clean. Amir, who had been skeptical throughout the ordeal, was now a firm believer in the supernatural. He noticed the changes in the house and expressed his gratitude to Zara for her bravery and determination. The two of them began to work together to make the house a true home, fixing up rooms and decorating to bring warmth and comfort to their new life. Despite the horrors they had faced, Zara and Amir found a sense of peace in their transformed home. They made it their mission to learn more about the house's history and to preserve its story. Zara continued to research and document her experiences, hoping to help others who might find themselves in similar situations. One evening, as Zara and Amir sat together in their newly renovated living room, they reflected on their journey. The house, once a source of fear and despair, had become a place of renewal and hope. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, their bond deepened by the shared ordeal. Zara looked around at the bright, welcoming space and smiled. The house, now free from its dark past, was finally their home. And as they settled in for a peaceful night, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The haunting of the alone new home was over, but its story would live on as a testament to courage and resilience. The house, once a prison of terror, had been transformed into a sanctuary, a place where new memories could be made and where the past could finally be laid to rest.
In after the previous night manager abruptly quit. He had heard stories about this place, rumors whispered among the locals, the kind you laugh off, but secretly hope aren't true. The motel, though small, felt vast in the stillness of the night. Its corridors were dimly lit, the peeling wallpaper barely visible in the flickering light. Outside, the wind howled, and the empty parking lot stretched into the distance, swallowed by the fog that rolled in like a living thing. As he sat behind the front desk, Jacob glanced at the guest register. Only 3 rooms were occupied, but something felt wrong. Room 13 was listed as vacant, yet a faint light glowed from under its door down the hall. He frowned, reaching for the old-fashioned phone to call maintenance, only to remember the landline had been cut off long ago. He decided to investigate. The hallway seemed to stretch unnaturally long as he approached room 13. His footsteps echoed louder than they should have, and the air felt thick, as if the motel itself were holding its breath. When he reached the door, he hesitated, his knuckles poised to knock. But before he could, the door creaked open on its own. Inside, the room was dark, save for the pale light of a TV casting eerie shadows. The static crackled, and an odd chill settled over Jacob. He stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. The bed was neatly made, but there was a sense that someone or something was there. A low whisper floated through the air, the words too faint to understand, but chilling all the same. "Hello?" Jacob called out, his voice barely above a whisper. The TV flickered, and for a brief moment, an image appeared on the screen. A figure standing in the room, its face obscured by shadows. Jacob's heart raced. He turned to look behind him, but the room was empty. The door, however, was now closed. Fear gnawed at him as he fumbled for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with an unnatural hum. Panic surged through him, and he pounded on the door. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. A deep, guttural voice spoke from behind him. "You shouldn't have come here." Jacob froze, dread washing over him. Slowly he turned, but the room was empty. Yet, in the TV's reflection, he saw it. Something dark, something ancient, lurking just behind him. Its eyes gleamed with malice, its form shifting and writhing in the shadows. The lights flickered, and the room grew colder. Jacob's breath came in shallow gasps as he backed away from the reflection, desperate to escape. But the figure moved closer, its presence overwhelming, suffocating. With a final surge of terror, Jacob lunged for the door. This time, it flew open and he stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. The corridor was deathly silent now, the flickering lights steady once more. Behind him, room 13 was dark again, the door closed as if nothing had happened. Shaken, Jacob returned to the front desk, heart pounding in his chest. The guest register caught his eye again, and his blood ran cold. Room 13 was now listed as occupied. By him. As he stood frozen in place, the TV behind the desk flickered on. Static filled the screen before fading to reveal a new guest in room 13. A man with terrified eyes, pounding on the door, begging for help. Jacob's reflection stared back at him, trapped in the grainy footage of the motel's haunted past. Jacob stood paralyzed, staring at the screen, his breath shallow as he watched the figure in the TV pounding on the door. He knew it was him, but how? His mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. The air around him felt thick, pressing in from all sides, and the faint whisper from room 13 echoed in his ears. The phone at the desk suddenly rang, cutting through the silence. Jacob jumped, staring at it in disbelief. The phone lines were dead. He knew that. But the old rotary phone rattled on the counter, demanding to be answered. His hand hovered over the receiver before he picked it up, his palm slick with sweat. "Hello?" he whispered, voice trembling. There was a long pause, then a low, distorted voice on the other end. "You can't leave." Jacob's stomach churned as the voice crackled through the phone. He slammed the receiver down and backed away, his legs shaking. His instincts screamed to run, but something in the motel held him in place, like a spider's web drawing its prey deeper into the trap. The lights above him flickered, dimming as the sound of faint footsteps echoed down the hall. Footsteps that didn't belong to any of the guests. Jacob's heart pounded in his chest as he peered down the long corridor. At the far end, a figure stood in the shadows, barely visible, watching. He blinked, and the figure vanished, leaving only the oppressive silence. "Leave now," a voice whispered from behind him. Jacob spun around, but there was no one there. The hallway remained empty, but he could feel something watching him, waiting. Panic surged through him, and he bolted for the exit. His feet pounded against the carpet as he rushed through the lobby, throwing the front doors open. But the world outside was wrong. The fog had thickened, swirling in unnatural patterns, and beyond it, the highway had disappeared. The parking lot stretched into an endless void, a vast expanse of nothingness. He could no longer tell where the motel ended and the fog began. Jacob took a step back, his chest tightening. He turned, desperate to find an escape, but the front doors had slammed shut behind him, locking him inside. The motel's oppressive presence seemed to grow stronger, wrapping around him like a vice. He stumbled backward, tripping over the worn rug, and fell to the floor. The faint whispers returned, growing louder, overlapping into a cacophony of disembodied voices. "You belong here now." The words echoed in his mind, and Jacob crawled backward, his eyes darting around the room. Suddenly, the lights above him flickered once more, casting long, eerie shadows across the walls. The air grew colder, and the whispers took on a malevolent tone, filling every corner of the lobby. Just as he scrambled to his feet, the lobby TV flickered back to life. The image of room 13 appeared on the screen again, but this time the door slowly creaked open, revealing a figure standing in the doorway. It was Jacob, his face twisted in terror, his eyes hollow, lost to the void. And then he heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing from behind. Jacob turned to see the shadowed figure from earlier, standing at the end of the hallway, its form more defined now, tall and grotesque, with limbs too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It took a step toward him, and Jacob's body froze with paralyzing fear. The whispers in his mind screamed louder. "Join us, forever." Jacob's throat tightened as the shadowy figure at the end of the hallway began to move. Its elongated limbs scraped the walls, and the air seemed to ripple around it. Each step it took echoed in Jacob's skull, like the ticking of a clock counting down his last moments. He backed away, heart hammering, his mind racing. There had to be a way out. There had to be. His eyes darted around the lobby, looking for any exit, but the oppressive fog outside still swirled, erasing the world beyond the motel's walls. The whispers in his head grew louder, a chorus of voices pulling him closer to the creature. "Join us. Stay forever." Jacob shook his head violently, trying to shake the voices away, but they only became more insistent, rising into a maddening hum. The figure was now halfway down the hall, its grotesque form more visible. Its skin was stretched and pale, its eyes, if it had any, hidden beneath a thick veil of darkness that cloaked its face. In a panic, Jacob darted behind the front desk, searching for anything. Keys, a weapon, something that could give him a chance. His fingers brushed against a drawer, and he yanked it open. Inside was an old rusted key marked Manager's Office. Without thinking, he grabbed it and bolted down a side hallway, the creature's footsteps quickening behind him. The manager's office was at the far end of the hall. Jacob fumbled with the key, his hands shaking as the whispers became a roar in his ears. Just as the footsteps reached the corner behind him, he managed to unlock the door and slam it shut behind him. He leaned against the door, his chest heaving, trying to catch his breath. The pounding footsteps stopped outside. Silence. But the voices didn't fade. They continued to claw at his mind, digging deeper, each whisper more desperate, more demanding. The office was small, cluttered with old paperwork and dusty furniture. A single window looked out into the fog, but there was no escape that way. Jacob's gaze landed on a row of monitors on the desk, security cameras, all trained on different parts of the motel. He stared at the flickering images, his heart skipping a beat. Every room appeared empty, but something was wrong. The camera feed for room 13 was static again, with flashes of that same shadowy figure, its form lingering near the bed. But as Jacob watched, the static cleared just long enough for him to see it. His own reflection, trapped in room 13, banging on the door, his face twisted in terror. It wasn't possible. He was here, in the office. But the screen showed him, another version of him, desperately trying to escape room 13. The lights in the office flickered, and a deep, guttural voice filled the room, louder now, closer. "You cannot run. You cannot hide." Suddenly, the office door rattled violently, as if something was trying to break in. Jacob backed away, heart thudding in his chest. The whispers swirled into a cacophony of madness, blending with the voice that boomed from every corner of the room. The door shuddered again, and then silence. Jacob stood frozen, his eyes locked on the door, waiting, his pulse racing. He wasn't sure what would come next, but he knew he was trapped. Then the monitors flickered again, and this time they all showed the same thing. Room 13. The door slowly opened, revealing the same shadowy figure from before. The image cut to Jacob's terrified reflection once more, still trapped, still banging. But now, his reflection looked directly at the camera and smiled. A chill crawled down Jacob's spine as the reflection's grin widened, stretching unnaturally across his face. The lights above him flickered one last time, and the whispers reached their peak, filling his mind with a single, deafening command. "It's time." Suddenly, the door to the office creaked open. But this time, it wasn't the shadowy figure on the other side. It was him, the same twisted version of himself from room 13, now standing in the doorway, eyes hollow and grin wide. Jacob backed away, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. The other him stepped forward, the grin never fading. "You took my place," the reflection whispered, its voice a perfect echo of his own. "Now it's your turn." Jacob felt a cold hand grip his shoulder, and everything went dark. Jacob's world plunged into darkness, the cold grip on his shoulder tightening, as if pulling him into the abyss. He gasped, struggling to breathe as the voices around him grew louder, merging into one overpowering force. His mind spun as he tried to fight against the sensation of being swallowed by something unseen, something vast and eternal. Suddenly, the darkness lifted, and Jacob found himself standing in the hallway outside room 13. His heart raced as he looked around in confusion. The air was thick with tension, the familiar static hum echoing in his ears. He turned slowly, his breath catching in his throat, when he saw the door to room 13 ajar. The light from inside flickered weakly, casting long shadows into the hallway. His hands trembled, and a deep sense of dread washed over him as he realized where he was. His reflection, the one that had haunted him on the monitor, had brought him back to room 13. A faint metallic scraping sound drew his attention to the floor. The rusted key to the room lay at his feet. He bent down and picked it up, the cold metal sending a shiver through his body. His mind screamed to run, to leave the motel and never look back. But his legs moved on their own, driven by some unseen force. He stepped closer to the open door, the whispers once again filling his ears. "Welcome home." Jacob pushed the door open wider, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the room was dimly lit by the flickering TV, casting a ghostly glow over the bed. The air was heavy, and the smell of dampness and decay filled his nostrils. The shadows seemed to pulse and writhe on the walls, as if alive. And then, on the bed, he saw it. A figure lay motionless, its body twisted unnaturally, the sheets tangled around its limbs. Jacob's heart nearly stopped when he realized who it was. Himself. His own lifeless body, eyes wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. His knees buckled, and he stumbled back, hitting the doorframe. The room seemed to close in around him, suffocating him with its malevolent energy. He turned, desperate to escape, but the door slammed shut with a thunderous bang, trapping him inside. The whispers grew louder, a chaotic symphony of madness, as the figure on the bed slowly turned its head to look at him. Its hollow eyes locked onto Jacob, and a twisted smile spread across its face. "You took my place," it whispered, the voice a chilling echo of his own. Jacob backed against the wall, his mind reeling. The figure on the bed rose, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it were a puppet being controlled by unseen strings. It stood at the foot of the bed, watching him with that same hollow grin. "You can't escape," the reflection whispered. "You belong to the motel now." Suddenly, the walls of the room began to shift, the wallpaper peeling away to reveal dark, pulsating shadows beneath. The room was alive, feeding off the terror that gripped Jacob's soul. The air crackled with electricity, and the floor beneath his feet began to tremble. The reflection stepped forward, its grin growing wider, more grotesque. "It's your turn now, just like all the others before you." Jacob's mind raced as he tried to make sense of the nightmare unfolding around him. The stories about the motel weren't just rumors. It was a trap, an endless loop of souls, each caretaker doomed to take the place of the one before. "No," Jacob whispered, his voice trembling. "I won't. I can't." But the reflection's eyes burned with malice. "You have no choice." The room began to spin, the shadows closing in around him. The reflection reached out, its hand cold and lifeless as it touched Jacob's chest. His body stiffened, and he felt an overwhelming force pulling him downward, as if the floor beneath him had become a black hole, dragging him into its depths. The last thing Jacob saw before the darkness swallowed him was the reflection's hollow, lifeless eyes. His own eyes, staring back at him with a twisted satisfaction. Jacob awoke in room 13, lying on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. His body felt heavy, his limbs numb. Slowly he sat up, looking around the room with a sense of eerie familiarity. He was the new caretaker now. The whispers were gone, replaced by the hum of the TV. The door to the room stood open, inviting him to leave. But he knew better. He had seen what waited outside, the endless fog, the emptiness. There was no escape. With a resigned sigh, Jacob stood and walked to the door. He stepped out into the hallway, feeling the motel's presence wrap around him like a cold embrace. The static from the TV faded as he approached the front desk, and the guest register sat waiting for him. Room 13 was vacant again. Jacob picked up the pen, his hand moving on its own as he wrote a single name in the register. Jacob Morris, room 13, permanent. The pen dropped from his hand, clattering onto the desk. He stared at the name, knowing that soon someone else would take his place. The next caretaker would come, just like he had, unaware of the